This is a 2004 Honda S2000, and if you spent any time around the S2000, you'll know that people love them. They're obsessed with them. I've driven a lot of cool cars, but I've never driven an S2000. So today, I'm going to drive this one and find out why people like them so much. I've borrowed this S2000 from Maury's Heritage Car Connection here in the Minneapolis area, and it is a sweet one. This is a 2004 S2000 with less than 16,000 miles on the odometer. Now, Maury's is a cool spot. If you're in Minneapolis, you can rent vintage and exotic cars from them just like this one, instead of a boring old Malibu from Enterprise at the airport. Today, I'm going to take you on a tour of the S2000. I'm going to show you all of its unusual quirks and features. And yes, even though it's a Honda, it does have some. Then I'm going to take it out on the road and see how this thing drives. And then at the end, I'm going to give it a Doug score. As usual, click the link below to go to autotrader.com/oversteer for more of my thoughts on my first S2000 experience, and for a list of other cars currently listed for sale on AutoTrader that I think live up to their hype. The first thing you notice when you climb inside an S2000 is certainly its biggest quirk. Every interior control is geared towards the driver. You know how in some cars the passenger has equal ability to change the stereo or the climate controls? Well, not quite in this one. Sorry, passenger. This car is all about the drive. My favorite example is the climate controls. You know how in most cars the climate controls are right in the middle, accessible to both the driver and passenger? Well, in this one they're in the middle, but only technically. They're pointed towards the driver on the driver's side of the middle, and they're on this panel that's really the whole driver's cockpit thing. The passenger can reach over there, but you kind of got to look over in order to see how you can adjust the climate controls. This isn't just limited to the climate controls, but also the climate vents. There are two climate vents that directly face the driver, blowing a perfect amount of air on me while I'm driving, whereas the passenger just gets that one all the way over there. And since I'm talking about the climate controls, might as well discuss how in this car you can get air to come from behind you. Yes, that's right. There's obviously regular vents, the window, the feed, you can get air out of all those places. That's normal. But if you turn the climate control dial to the little arrow pointing behind you, you can get heat coming from behind the seats. That way you can have the top down on sort of a cool day and still feel nice and warmed. That's smart. Interestingly, all the driver focus controls even apply to the stereo. In this car, you get inside and you'll find that the only stereo controls are on the left side over by the driver's left hand. Volume, change the channel on the stereo, change the mode you're in. The passenger has to ask nicely if they want the audio changed. Or at least that's how it looks when you first climb inside an S2000, but it's actually a trick. The S2000 does have audio controls over on the left side of the steering wheel, but in the middle, under this silver cover that says S2000 and has odd dots on it, open it up and you'll find the actual stereo. If the passenger wants to make changes to the stereo volume, the channel, whatever, they can do that here. Now the interesting thing is, if the driver is trying to turn the volume down on the left side and the passenger is trying to turn it down from the stereo itself, the passenger will win that fight. This is programmed somehow to override what happens over on the left. Another interesting thing, above the stereo you also find two hidden vents. They provide a little bit more air or heat to the passenger, although it's worth noting that they aren't very adjustable like a traditional air conditioning vent. Now the interesting thing about the stereo being placed under that silver thing is that if you have a passenger you don't like all that much, or you don't like their taste in music, you just don't have to tell them about it, and then the music controls can all be yours. Now the reason Honda put all these controls here in easy reach of the driver is because this was a driver's car, and they wanted to be able to just drive around, and if you want to adjust something, just quickly adjust it without moving your hand too far from the steering wheel. It's sort of like a cockpit in a fighter jet. And nowhere was it more like a cockpit than the gauge cluster.
That's because it's all electronic. Turn it on and you can see what I mean. The fuel gauge and the temperature gauge over on the right are electronic, and they display the readout not with a needle but with little bars that light up. The tachometer is also electronic. You can see what happens when the engine revs up. Take a look. And in the middle of it all is the speedometer, which provides a digital readout of your speed.
Another way that you can tell this car was built for the driver and not the passengers, if you look in the footwell. Now on the driver's side, in the footwell, there's some sort of bar going across it that adds stiffness, bracing, whatever, I don't know. The passenger side has that same bar, but it also has a giant hump that the driver's side just doesn't have. I don't know what it's there for, but it does kind of limit your leg and foot room when you're in this car. But then again, as the passenger, you don't matter in an S2000. Now, it's hard to see that hump show up on camera, but I swear it's there, and I swear it's kind of annoying, and you can easily tell that from the floor mats. Here's the driver floor mat, a perfect square on the bottom, no hump. And here's the passenger floor mat in order to compensate for the hump. You can see how much room it takes up. Now, speaking of the passenger side over here, one of the interesting things about this car is it has no glove box. That's right. the S2000 has no glove box. Not that unusual for a sports car, but very unusual for a Honda. Now, I've said before that I love when cars have no glove box because the automaker scrambles to come up with all these other ways you can store stuff inside the interior, and in this car, it's no different. There is, for example, a little storage compartment in between the seats that's larger than you might think. There are little storage nets on each of the doors, and there's another little storage net in the passenger footwell, although it robs even more space considering the hump. But my favorite storage compartment is in the middle. Push a little button in the middle, and this little silver lid slides open to reveal a nice little storage compartment. Not cup holders, there are none in this car, but storage compartment nonetheless. Another funny thing about the storage situation in this car is that inside the largest interior storage compartment, that would be the one between the seats, there's also the trunk release. It's almost like the car is saying, look, if you can't fit it in here, don't worry, there's still one more storage area you can put it in inside the car. Next up, I gotta talk about one of my favorite buttons in this car, one of my favorite buttons in any Japanese car. That would be the cruise control button and the window defogger button. They're so bizarre. They're designed to fit flush with the driver's cockpit as it curves out, and so they look pretty nice when they're just sitting there, but when you turn it on, it sort of ruins that flush look. It's a very strangely shaped button, but there is a reason that they put them here, and that's because when you turn on the cruise controller defogger, nothing shows up in the gauge cluster to let you know they're on. They just sit right in front of the steering wheel, and their little lights turn on right in your cockpit, so they don't have to put a redundant light or warning to let you know those items are on. And then there are a couple of other unusual S2000 quirks worthy of mentioning. For example, the fuel door release. You look for it all over your driver's cockpit. You look for it on the door. You look for it in the driver footwell. It isn't in any of those places. Instead, it's a little barely labeled black button on the back of the door frame. I've never seen it put there before. In a car that is so logically simply laid out, that's a bit of an odd one. I also love how the headlights and taillights are seemingly stuck on there one by one and then sealed in one unit. For some reason, it looked really cool to me. It was very common at the time in 2000 when this car came out, and I think it's aged pretty well. The other cool quirk about the S2000 is just how simple everything is in here. There's no guesswork, nothing weird. Everything does what it says and it's placed where you'd expect it, aside from a few things I've already named. That's because at the end of the day, this is a Honda. Take a look.
For example, the door panel hosts normal mirror controls, normal power window switches, and a normal door handle. The center console is incredibly simple. There's a button for the roof and a button for the hazard lights, symmetrical and sized the same. In the middle of the interior, you'll find the power outlet, well labeled and easily reachable. The turn signal stalk is normal, and so is the wiper stalk, which isn't always true of unusual sports cars. They stuck a practical wind deflector between the seats, and the antenna isn't carefully hidden in some unknown hiding spot. It's just on there, stuck on the back where it works.
Another interesting thing about this car, it had a reputation for having no storage space, even in the trunk, and as you can see, that reputation is true. It's really small back here, but that is a little hump for a spare tire, which is kind of surprising in a car this size with this size trunk. So those are all the cool ins and outs of the S2000 that you may not have known about. Now it's time to get this thing out on the road. But first, a little refresher about the S2000 in case you drive a Fit or a Civic and you're wondering, is this thing really a Honda?
The S2000 was first sold for the 2000 model year, which is amazing to me. The earliest ones are almost 20 years old. The early S2000s used a 2-liter 4-cylinder with 240 horsepower and only 153 pound-feet of torque, but complaints about the low torque figure led Honda to bump up to a 2.2-liter 4-cylinder with 162 pound-feet beginning with the 2004 model year. The S2000 was rear-wheel drive. It only came with a 6-speed manual transmission. It weighed a little above 2,800 pounds, and it was offered until 2009. Now, time to get this one out on the road.
There we go. Driving an S2000 for the very first time. Very excited about this. This is the last one of these cars that you have to drive that I've never driven. I don't know why I never had the chance, but here we go. One of the things people always said about this car is that it really doesn't come alive until you're above 6,000 RPM. And boy, is that true. It's actually a little slow. It's slow. 5, now 6 hits. It's like an old school turbo car where the turbo just kicks in. It does get quick at 6, but you really have to go up there and get a lot of that power. Woo! Wow. Yeah, it's nice and planted on the road. That's awesome. It really feels tight, glued to the road, go-karty. It also feels, even though it's not that fast, it feels like, it feels just zippy and lively, and like you can kind of take it anywhere and put it anywhere and do anything with it. The problem is, under 6,000, it doesn't feel dramatically faster than a Miata. So I floor it here. It's all right. All right, flooring it here. It's all right. It's reasonably quick, but then Yeah, you can really feel it get quick above 6,000. It really kicks on. Wow. Woo! Wow. But you gotta really be up there. You have to trust this car that if you go up there and you really thrash it, that it's not gonna break and get destroyed or whatever. If you really wanna have fun with it, you have to really, really get that engine going. Shifting is very easy. The transmission is tight, close, feels easy to shift, put into gear, whatever gear you want, and the clutch is very simple, like the NSX. Very simple and easy. Man, I love putting it around a corner. Oh man, that's so cool. You're very connected to the car when you're in this car. Very, very connected. It doesn't feel like the car is doing very much for you. Very precise handling, not on the level of exotic cars that have zillions of dollars of engineering behind them, but very cool, and it's benefited by its incredibly small size and it's very lightweight. This car has 240 horsepower, which isn't a small amount, especially for a small car like this, but it just doesn't have all that much torque. And you can really feel that, especially at low range. It's kind of disappointing. I do like that everything is well put together, well screwed together in this interior. It feels almost like a Porsche or a Mercedes-Benz or something like that, that everything is just very well designed, well built. You put on the turn signal, there's no play in it, there's no play in the shift lever. You can't really move it all that much in gear. All the buttons are nice, there's no creaking or rattling, stupid stuff like that. On the highway, it feels very stable, and I'm actually impressed. It has that German car stability to it. I'm a little bit disappointed in the acceleration. However, I'm sort of thrilled by how lively and fun it is to kind of throw around. I like cars where you have to work for the power. I think in this one you have to maybe work a little bit too hard. But man, putting it around that corner, woo! It feels great. Yeah, it is playful. That's a great way to put it. It feels more playful than just about anything else aside from a Miata, and it certainly is faster than a Miata. I don't want to say, I mean, it's faster than a Miata. I think it does feel faster than FRS BRZ, but not by much. It would have been nice if this car had a little more low-end torque. Maybe that thing came on at like 4,000 RPM. Nonetheless, this is a cool car. It's well put together. It's fun to play around with, and I totally see why everybody likes these things. So that's the S2000. Simplicity is the word here. It's simple to drive, simple to use, simple even to look at, with its gorgeous lines uncluttered by cuts and gouges and creases designed to make it look more exotic or more expensive than it actually is. And that, I think, is why people like the S2000 so much, and why values have stayed so high. Back when this thing was new, the S2000 sold for somewhere in the low $30,000 range. Today, 8 to 17 years later, depending on the model year, the average asking price for an S2000 on AutoTrader is still almost $20,000. That's impressive. These cars are highly desirable. Honda didn't make that many of them. People still really want them. And now you know why.
And now it's time for the Doug score. Starting with the weekend categories and styling, I've always found the S2000 to be a truly beautiful car, although I will admit it's starting to get a little dated. It earns a 7 out of 10. Acceleration, the S2000 was fairly quick when it came out, but 20 years later, the top-end version of the new Honda Accord is roughly as quick. The S2000 does 0 to 60 in 5.5 seconds, which gives it only a 5 out of 10. Next up is handling, and the S2000 was so lively and exciting with really direct, precise steering. Maybe the best cheap sports car I've ever driven, and it gets an 8 out of 10, which ties it with legends like the Lexus LFA and Audi R8. I have no regrets about that. Drive one and you'll understand. Next up is cool factor, and the S2000 doesn't fare quite so well. These are fun to drive, but not exactly rare or thrilling to see on the road, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Same story for importance. This is a fun car, but it isn't truly significant, and it earns a 6 out of 10. Still, that brings the weekend score to a highly respectable 32 out of 50, which places it on the same level as the E46 BMW M3 and right behind some big names. Next up are the daily categories, starting with features, and the S2000 struggles here. It wasn't lavishly equipped in 2004, and it's even worse by today's standards, and it earns a 3 out of 10. Comfort is fine, but not great. It's about as comfortable as you'd expect given what type of car it is, and it earns a 4 out of 10. Quality measures materials and reliability, and both are good. Reliability is notoriously strong, and while materials aren't up to luxury car grade, they're good enough, and it earns a 7 out of 10. Practicality is where the S2000 loses some points. It has just 5 cubic feet of cargo space in that small trunk, and while its good gas mileage helps things out, it doesn't have a glove box, for God's sake. Not enough to bring the score up from a 2 out of 10. Finally, value. S2000s are rising, but they're still a decent buy. If the S2000 was a little faster, this number would be higher, but it's starting to feel slow by modern standards, and it earns a 7 out of 10 for a total daily score of 23 out of 50, which isn't great, of course, but it's pretty good for a small two-seat roadster like this. Added up, and the total Doug score is 55 out of 100, which places it right next to some other affordable sports cars, ahead of the 97 Viper, but behind the Porsche 996 and the E46 M3. But if you can put up with the S2000's lack of practicality, it's a worthy choice, and it definitely lives up to its hype.